You're in your kitchen, 7 a.m. and your coffee machine is flashing descaling. And you still haven't had your dose of caffeine. You open the cupboard and you see that bottle of white vinegar. And you might think, well, this should work, right? It's natural, it's cheap, and everyone says it's good for cleaning. And as you can see, mine is pretty empty, and yes, I use that a lot in my house. Well, that bottle of vinegar could maybe cost you hundreds of dollars or euros in repairs. And as a bonus, a coffee that tastes like vinegar for quite a while. Hi everyone, welcome to Cafe Lista. I'm Colin, the channel to learn everything about coffee, espresso at home, and how to maintain and clean your coffee machine. Today we are settling the vinegar debate once and for all. Why do so many people use it? Does it actually work? But most importantly, is it risk-free for your machine? This isn't about just saving money. It's about not destroying a machine that might have cost you several $100s. So why everyone uses white vinegar? Let's start with the obvious. Why do we all use vinegar? As I mentioned, I use that all the time, but not in my coffee machine. So the reason number one people use it on their super automatic coffee machine is, I think, because it's there. When your machine demands a descale at 7 a.m. and you haven't had your coffee yet, you're not going to order a product online, you grab what's in the cupboard. And you know, vinegar costs a few dollars per liter. It's extremely cheap. The reason number two, it is, I think, the natural trap. We all try to avoid harsh chemical product, right? Makes sense. Vinegar is food grade. We can use some in a salad. It's natural, so it can damage a machine. Can it? Well, it's quite false. It's not necessarily good for aluminum and rubber. And we will look at that in detail right after. The reason number three, and I think it's the most important here, it's the legacy of the drip coffee maker. For decades, cleaning a coffee maker or even a kettle meant running white vinegar through it. Yes, it's cheap, as we said, and yes, it descales. But the problem here is the side effect and the compatibility with your machine. But here's what people forget. Your bean-to-cup machine or espresso machine is not a drip coffee maker. It's not the same price, it doesn't work the same. Your Magnifica or Barista Express or Jura, these machines operate with a very high pressure. They have a thermoblock channel that are just a few millimeters wide. These are not the same machines at all, and it will have an impact on the descaling process. So concretely, what happens when you use white vinegar? We might have one big problem here. So problem number one, the aluminum corrosion. If your machine has an aluminum thermoblock, and that's the case for many machines like De'Longhi, for example, using vinegar on aluminum is a risky bet. The aluminum has a protective oxide layer. It's like a microscopic shield, and the acetic acid in the vinegar attacks this shield. It's not instant, it takes time, but it's a risk, and it's quite a bad idea on aluminum. If that happens, it's often the thermoblock that needs to be replaced. Problem number two is the limescale chunks effect. What is it exactly? It's kind of a sneaky problem. You know, vinegar is it's a weak acid, so it will break the bond between scale and metal before it has fully dissolved the scale. The result, you might have chunks of limescale floating in your hydraulic circuits. This little chunk travels down the narrowest point, generally flow meter, to group valve, and might get stuck. If that happens, it will be an expensive repair. Professional descalers based on lactic acid, citric acid, for example, or some other type, dissolve scale more effectively. This doesn't make the risk of small chunk disappear, but it reduces it. And you know, I'm not a technician myself. I like to repair the machine, and I have a lot, but I have had the chance to discuss with several technicians, and their feedback is pretty clear. White vinegar on an espresso machine, on a super automatic coffee machine, is not a good idea. And that's not all. Problem number three, the seal and the O-rings. You know those little O-rings that keeps everything watertight? They're made of rubber or silicone. A repeated use of vinegar can make them swell. And the swollen seal changes the geometry, and the piston, for example, in your brew group has to work harder. The motor gets strained, you might have here again problem. Something's gonna break. So you could say that repeated vinegar use concentrates the risk of a premature aging of a certain seals and components. And problem number four, finally, the last little problem, probably the least bad of all, the taste. The smell might get stuck in certain plastic hoses, so there will be a risk of having a vinegar taste in your coffee. Probably not indefinitely, but it's still not great if you want a good espresso in the morning and it tastes like vinegar. An important clarification. We are talking here mainly about repeated use, sometimes poorly dosed, over months or years. A single use of white vinegar won't necessarily destroy your machine. The real problem is increasing the probability of a breakdown, just to save a few dollars. And by the way, some manufacturers can refuse warranty coverage if it clearly says in the manual, no vinegar. So keep that in mind. In conclusion, vinegar isn't deadly. It's just a risky bet when there are compatible, cheap solutions made for this. And if you want a quick checklist to dial in your super automatic coffee machines, you will find in the description a free guide. You can go have a look. So what to do now? What should we use instead of the vinegar? The good news, there are two simple options, depending on whether you want to be zero hassle or cheaper but smart. Option 1, you probably know, just use the brand product. Yes, it's more expensive, and safe and easy. It's really the simplest. Let's go look at the descaler recommended by the brand, De'Longhi, Jura, Seiko, Philips. It's more expensive per use, but it's formulated for the machine's material. It rinses well. It's also sometimes recommended. It might even avoid the guarantee if you're not using their product. That's another debate, but again, keep that in mind if you want to use something different, especially if your machine is new. Option 2, ready-made generic descalers. They are cheaper, but choose the right one. If you want to pay less without improvising, you can use an universal descalers. You know, the one sold for coffee maker, for espresso machine. They're already prepared, which often cost much less than the brand logo version. The key point here is to look at the ingredients. For many machines, ideally you want a descaler based on lactic acid, sometimes lactic and citric acid. Sometimes you might have sulfamic acid, but it will again depend on your machine. Citric acid can also work very well, and you can also buy citric acid in bulk and make your own mixture. It will be here even cheaper. Be careful here with dosing in that case. I will put a link in the description for selected product. You should avoid any kind of weird product with an unclear composition or those that look like homemade recipes. In short, a generic yes, but not randomly. If the composition is clear and if it's a descaler designed for a coffee machine. It is often a pretty good compromise, much cheaper. A quick note here for machine with an aluminum boiler, like a Gaggia for example. On those machines, they are much more sensitive on the aluminum side. So the safest option will be to use a descaler formulated for aluminum with inhibitors, rather than trying any kind of universal product. And by the way, if this video helps you see things a little bit more clearly, a thumbs up is always appreciated. It really helps us to make more of this type of video. Subscribe if you haven't already, if you feel like it. Thank you for your support. So the 20-second summary. Here is the key point to remember. Vinegar is great for a lot of things. It's an old habit from a time when coffee machines were simple. Our modern machine, bean-to-cup espresso machine, quite different. So I think the best option isn't to use whatever you have in the cupboard. Is to use a real descaler designed for coffee machine. Either the brand one to be 100% worry-free or a universal one by checking the composition. And in the end, it rarely costs you more to avoid the hassle of flavor and especially breakdowns that cost far more than the price of a descaler. Bottom line here, keep vinegar for your salad. Your machine deserves better. And I'm curious, I know people have been using that for years without problem. That doesn't mean it's not dangerous, but tell me in the comments, what do you use to descale your machine? And don't leave yet. If you like this video, I am pretty sure you will love the one here. I recommend you watching it. As usual on Cafe Lista, I'll see you next week. I hope you'll have a good day. Ciao.